All right, welcome to the first episode of the Breach Report. My name is Jason Firch, and I'm joined here with Josh Allen. Josh, this is your love child, so why don't you give our listeners a really quick intro about what this entire show is about?
Absolutely. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to cover about five of the major breaches in the last 5 days. And I picked that just because there's actually tons of them and it'd take forever to cover them all. Somebody else kind of already does that. So I want to go into a little bit of detail just on what happened, what's the kind of data that was stolen, who's affected by this in what way, and then what users and the companies can do to fix it and how to prevent it in the future. Uh, the idea here is to just kind of bring up a lot more awareness around these and get them out sooner and sooner. So I'm trying to pull these as close from direct source as possible so that, we can just get the information out there into the open faster for everyone.
Excellent. And I think we wanted to start with the Greater Baltimore Medical Center here.
Yes, so this one's really interesting because what I wanted to point out right away is that this was a hack that is actually going to affect this medical center's ability to treat patients. So people are physically being affected now by a computer hack. So here's some of the procedures scheduled for Monday, December 7th. So this was already in the past. This happened this last week. May be affected. Um, so some people had to reschedule. Uh, all kinds of very interesting things here. So what I wanted to find, I might have to back up here. Here we go. It was a ransomware incident. So they don't give us a lot of details yet on exactly what happened, but ransomware has been huge this year. Something that is already talked about on the PurpleSec website, right? Ransomware's up. So this typically happens through unpatched systems, in my experience. So looks like they know they're working on it. People have been impacted. Um, what you can do to avoid this in the future is patch your stuff.
Right, and I'm sure as things come out, more information will come out to anyone who's impacted. They'll probably dive in a little bit deeper into what exactly was impacted. Like, were medical records accessed and exfiltrated? If so, how many impacted patients? Things of that nature. That will come out in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I wish we already had that information. That's what I'd prefer to share, but unfortunately, we can only go with what's been made public so far.
So maybe we'll come back to that one, and we'll keep
Yeah,
that as an evolving story.
it's a HIPAA thing, so there's also there's going to be some time before that's made available, and there will still be limited information because of that, thanks to HIPAA,
Mm-hmm.
which is good. Moving on, Spotify on December 9th announced to the state of California that they had a data breach, quote unquote. Doesn't sound like something was actually breached or spilled. What happened was they reset an undisclosed number of user passwords after discovering a vulnerability in their account management systems. So it sounds like they were doing some kind of routine maintenance or scanning to discover this. They did not get any information. Nothing was actually exfiltrated, but a lot of users would have had their account affected. So if your Spotify password was reset recently, this is likely the cause of that. It's, as they say, it's undisclosed number. We don't know how many people were affected, but for good measure, because anytime there's a vulnerability discovered, it's probably already been exploited or somebody's going to try very soon. So make sure you reset your password. And as always with password systems, use multi-factor authentication so that you don't have just that one password as your security.
Yeah, we've talked about multi-factor authentication in the last few episodes of the weekly ingest, and yeah, something that we should all be doing if we aren't already.
Yeah, so the next one I want to move on to is the Dental Care of Alliance. They discovered back actually on October 11th that they were the victim of a hack that began all the way back in September. Patient data may have been accessed, they say, that means it was, in the security incident, including names, addresses, dental diagnosis, and treatment. So this is a HIPAA violation, HIPAA breach, which uh, boo, that sucks for DCA because HIPAA violations are not cheap. Over 1 million US dental patients were impacted by this.
Yeah, I
So
think I've seen the stats. It's something $10,000 to $50,000 per incident.
yes, and an incident is, I believe they define that as a on a per patient basis. It's not like this wouldn't just be one $10,000 incident. It would be potentially 1,000,000 $10,000 incidents.
Yeah,
So
hundreds of
yeah.
millions of dollars probably.
Typically, they don't go full force with that. They're lenient if the companies are actually taking it seriously and trying to fix it. That's
Hmm.
really kind of reserved for just negligence, right? So it depends on exactly what we'll find out comes out of this of what they said the breach was. They say they have no specific evidence that the information was used for malicious purpose. Well, no, there's no way you possibly could. That's kind of silly, and that's kind of part of the problem, right? Is once the data is stolen, you never know when it's going to be used, really, because
Yeah, or
these things
how,
are
right?
sold and resold for years, years and years. So anything that you had related to DCA is something that you're now going to want to monitor, as they said here: names, email addresses, personal addresses, HIPAA information. If you've got credit monitoring, that's good. DCA is not going to offer credit monitoring for this one. Um, I'm not really sure why.
Hmm. So, if you're impacted by this, what would be something that you can do, at least proactively?
So that's going to come back to identity theft monitoring. Really, this kind of PII is, it's less about passwords and more about just if people can use your information to open up accounts illegitimately. So just as and something you should always be doing is be diligent, check your credit periodically, make sure no weird accounts have been opened up under your name. Make sure all your addresses that it shows on your report are in fact yours.
Yeah, you can also freeze your credit too, so that it's. I've done this on my own accounts with my credit unions, and you just freeze your account. You have a physical PIN number that you provide, and it's not. It's if you lose it, you have to try and get proof of verification. It's a whole process, but it's a physical PIN that only I can unlock. So if someone wanted to use my information, let's say to open up a loan on in a house for a house in my name, they wouldn't be able to do that because I have my credit frozen.
So do they call that person when they try to do that, or how does that work?
I mean, they no, they just it's usually flagged in the system if someone were to go to a bank to open up a loan, or if you're doing it over the phone. They would say, you have to first unfreeze your credit before we can actually do a credit check. And then that's just a layer of security there that prevents someone from even being able to open up that line of credit or that inquiry into the credit that could cause damage to your score.
Interesting. So it's like a data vault in that where you're actually having to authenticate anytime it's being accessed. That's really
Hmm.
smart. And we
Yeah.
should do that with a lot more stuff, I think.
Again, real quick, I don't know if you've covered that was a ransomware attack. Again, it's interesting in that space.
Indeed. Yeah. And this mentions yet another ransomware attack at Colorado's information technology company, Complete Technology Solutions. And this is yet another example of third parties resulting in larger data breaches, right? Because the DCA is in a dental office. They have 320 affiliated
Mhm.
dental practices across 20 states, right? So people all over the nation are affected by this one data breach in one spot. And it's very likely that this had something to do with it, that they mention it, the ransomware attack, potentially using the same exploit, possibly from the same threat acting group. Um,
Mhm.
and this, in fact, is the I think they're saying here that this is the information technology company that DCA uses. So
Mhm.
again, third parties, ransomware. Next one is a pretty big one. Again, back in mid-October, so there's always a little bit of lag time on when these become public. Panasonic in India had a data release and extortion plot. So again, ransomware. So, and what was really interesting was it was network access large backups of corporate email.
Wow.
Ouch. Written in Russian. So this came from Russia. Post warned that if the unnamed company did not pay a $500,000 ransom within 7 days, data would be publicly released. Ransom note had been sent to the company's corporate email addresses. They also offered the data and access to the company's network to anyone willing to pay $40,000. So this is another thing that ransomware does. They don't just ransom it to the company, right, and say, well, you have to pay 500 grand. You know, because when this first happened, some companies, big enough companies, would say, you know what, eat it. We can restore whatever. Like, you can lock our data. We'll throw those hard drives away. It's not that expensive to us.
Mhm.
Then, the hackers get a little smart and they're like, okay, well, or we can just sell it to anybody else who's willing to pay a tenth of the price, which suddenly puts a lot more pressure on that company to pay the ransom now or deal with them, right? Because, like, well, a lot more people can come up with $40,000 for millions of people's worth of information than you can $500,000, right?
Yeah, it's a economic way of getting a lot of corporate insider information. I mean, those emails are very valuable. I mean, trade secrets, business operations, processes. It's a lot of internal IP that it could be worth a fortune. So it's a very interesting vertical. I've not seen that before.
And look at here. So on November 3rd, they actually released 4 gigs worth of data, which I don't think was all of it, which is another typical thing. They usually don't release all of it. They'll release some of it, maybe make some money off of it, and also show that they're serious. Like, look, we got it. We'll put it out there, right? And people are willing to pay for it as kind of a show of force. So 4 gigabytes worth of data that belongs to Panasonic was released, like usernames and passwords for Google corporate email, remote admin, uh, cyber roam, who knows what that is, McAfee, ouch, in the factory system. So these are some pretty serious violations right here for Panasonic security. So I really hope that they have been reacting quickly to this. So again, this is talking about how it is just a textbook case of increasingly hostile cybersecurity environment. I've talked before about how this is like a Cold War. Every time the blue team comes up with a defense, the red team comes up with a newer attack.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. Scroll down to the actual data shared. So look, it's all internal data. So that's one thing I want to point out is that this doesn't affect any kind of Panasonic users if you have any of their devices directly. Your data hasn't been exposed. However, in looking at these types of accounts, and I even see banks on here, so it looks like they've gained a lot of information from Panasonic where they could potentially poison the supply line with malware and all kinds of things.
Yeah, so if you scroll up, I just wanted to show you one quick thing. That sentence, something about suppliers. Another exposed PDF contained the list of 197 suppliers. You were just there. Scroll down, bud. Or I don't know, wherever the picture of the guy was.
Yeah. Oh, right here. Here we go.
Yeah, you were there. I was reading it. So this right here is interesting because supply lines are very, very particular, especially for electronics companies. So just one example of that is silver. Companies don't actually want that information out there of how much silver they're buying to make their products, because an increase in silver is going to dramatically increase the price of their products, which means it's going to hurt their bottom line in a lot of cases. So that's very significant in that respect. And then also tainting that supply line, going after those supply lines, and then there's all of these tertiary things that you could do to inflict even more damage that potential hackers would go into that and try and take advantage of.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, there's all kinds of motives these days, even stock market motives, people who can get inside information and trying to make big moves. That's been some of these ransomware attacks as well. Yeah.
Let's get into the last one here, right?
All right, last one, another really big one. Foxconn, we know who they are. They make the chips inside your iPhones. $34 million ransom, which is probably not a whole lot to them. But again, we've talked about how I think really the bigger threat is not the money, and companies are trying to realize that. It's that data. That data is worth a lot more than the money is. So they have a revenue of $172 billion. So 34 million is really not that much for them, which is another play that's pretty common from ransomware is, well, we'll ask something reasonable, right? Foxconn can afford a $34 million ransom in hopes that they'll just pay it to move on. So what they've actually done here is they went and they attacked their web servers, right? So where we should be seeing some good Foxconn information here. Instead, it's 404ing out, which means they can't find it because they locked it all down. This is their facility website, so I think that's their intranet, right? Here's the actual code of the text here, so let's take a look at this. Foxconn, your network has been hacked. Your ID is number 152. Look at that, they give you a ticket, right? Files, backups, and shadow copies are unavailable until you pay for a decryption tool. If no contact is made in 3 business days after the infection, first portion of data will be shared to public at such and such .onion, so that's on the Tor network website, and all the rest will remain unreachable to you. Saw this with the previous run, right? Portions of the data gets leaked out at different times. To save your data from destruction, do not do all these things, right? Which sometimes this is legit, although sometimes it's kind of BS. But these days, some of the ransomware will in fact mess you up more if you don't follow these instructions. So it can be a really nasty business. The real problem with ransomware is once you've been hit with it, it's a lot harder than trying to prevent it. So they're actually asking for this in Bitcoins. 1,804 Bitcoins, or about $34,686,000. See, so let's see. This was November 29th, but they did not attack the whole company. It was just part of their North American facility. So they encrypted 1,200 servers, which is a really big attack. So 100 gigabytes of unencrypted files, not too big, and deleted 30 terabytes of backups. Ouch.
Yeah. Talk about that a little bit, because that's something that I feel gets lost when your backups get deleted. That's a pretty big deal. I mean, BR, DC, things like that.
Yeah. So I mean, your backups are meant to be your emergency, your parachute, right? That traditionally has been something the blue teams used as an effective mitigation strategy against ransomware. Well, you know what? If we don't want to pay it, and if it's not really that sensitive of data, right, we can tell them to F off, we can delete all of our stuff, and we can put new hard drives and everything and pull our backups and be back in business in one day, right? Which is not too bad for some companies for turnaround time. But that's becoming harder now because this ransomware will first infect your computer and its backups and wait before it decides to lock it down. So a lot of these are on like a timer or kind of like a logic bomb type thing. So, you're not safe because you've actually been backing up infected files for who knows how long. Um, there's some things you can do about it. Number one is really think about the way that you're doing your backups. Make sure your backups are, being scanned and cleaned. And it is always good to create 2 different types of backups. And this kind of depends on how sensitive your data is. So something that we did when I was working for a government agency previously, we had an offsite data backup as well as an on-site data backup. And the on-site one was a little bit shorter, right? The offsite one was servers, and those were actually kept on tape drives, and we physically took them out of the computers, drove them to another facility with a vault and stored them there, right? So they were untouchable by anybody but a select few people. Now, that doesn't quite protect you from the infection. You still have to watch out for that, but that'll really protect your backups against becoming infected, right? Because at some point you weren't infected, and you could theoretically continue going back until you find a point where you've no longer been infected. This was a government agency, so they also had years of retention where some companies won't. Your cloud backups, your virtual backups, like OneDrive's really not going to protect you, because if you're downloading files and your download folder is connected to your OneDrive, guess where those malicious downloads just went to? Right. So OneDrive's not really a good backup solution. Neither is, having your Windows backup sitting on a drive that's already on your PC. That's not going to save you from these kinds of things because they'll move across there. So you really do need your backups to be off-site or offline in some way. There needs to be a disconnect between where your running system is and where those are stored so that there's no traversal.
Yeah, and for an average user, you can just get an external hard drive and then do like a weekly or monthly backup, however you feel is comfortable, and
Yeah.
then just disconnect the drive
Yeah,
every
don't leave it
time.
plugged in. Yeah.
Don't leave it plugged in, disconnect it, and then now you've got all of your family photos, all of your information that's on your computer that's private to you that you don't want out deleted, outright deleted. You can just back that up without an issue.
Right. And if I were you, I'd keep two. Because here's the thing is, while that drive's been safe, if you've now been infected, the next time you plug it in, right?
Yeah.
So it is a difficult thing, and I don't want people to be overly paranoid about ransomware, but it is a nasty bit of business. So really what you want to try to do is keep that from getting into your network. Make sure you're patching everything. Make sure that you're being smart about the stuff that you're installing. Keep all of your stuff up to date. A lot of these, as we saw, came through third parties. So, you know, if you're a business, make sure you're doing your vendor assessments, being secure from the outset, shifting left. I've talked about this over and over. Shifting left is how you prevent this. Is how you, I don't want to say prevent, but mitigate the risk of this. There we go.
Right. All right. Well, Josh, I think we're at time here. Is there anything else that you want to talk about?
No, I think we're pretty good. These breaches are often reported months after they are in fact discovered. So this is something, I'd love to work on making faster and more informative for everyone, especially our viewers. So I'm going to work toward better research on that because it'd be really great to get these things out really, really fast. Some of these take months and months, and the problem is bad guys are using the data while we're waiting.
Excellent. Thank you, Josh, for your time and for doing all this research.
Absolutely, and it was great to be here, and we'll check in next week. Or after the break, we'll see here soon what we're going to do, and then we'll continue this definitely into 2021.
Yes, do keep an eye out for that. You can like, subscribe, do all that stuff if you want. And we will hit 2021 very hard just to keep you up to date.